So I woke up this morning, Monday, and I know it happened, and I still kind of don't believe that this is what happened to the Mets. I thought I was going to, wake up this morning and be rushing to put together a detailed Met Dodgers wild card round, scouting report, and make that last second decision whether to hop on a flight to Los Angeles for a best 2 out of 3 against the Mets and Dodgers. I still feel like it's going to happen almost, but of course it didn't happen. I mean, I'm still shocked. I spent most of the last month or 6 weeks saying to friends of mine who were Met fans, come on, you know they're going to win 10 out of 12. At some point, blow this away. They're so much better than the Reds and Diamondbacks and Giants, and they'll have a puncher's chance because of their stars in October. And it just didn't happen. And it's kind of unforgivable and unpardonable. And for three things, why don't we break down some of the issues? Look, they were strange. They were the really good offensive team that was bad on offense. That's where we should start on number one. Like, I can't explain their offense. They hit the second most homers in Mets history. Their OPS plus was the best ever in a 162 game season. It was the ninth most steals in the team's history. It was the fifth most homers in the team's history. The 89.1% steal rate was not only 7% better than anyone else this year, it was the best in Major League history for any 154 game season or longer. Juan Soto almost went 40-40 and set the team record in walks. Francisco Lindor did go 30-30. Pete Alonso had a very good year, second in RBIs, fifth in extra base hits, eighth in homers. Nimmo set his personal record for homers for both total and against left-handed. Alvarez came back and was better. Beatty had a bit of a breakout year. I get it, they were top heavy. They had to get to 84 wins. And that kind of offense alone should have got them to 84 wins. And somehow it didn't. That's one. Number two, look, I think more than anything, this was about pitching. I felt the same way in 2007 watching the Mets down the stretch. I kept telling Met fans, don't worry, they're not going to blow this lead. But eventually in September, they had to use Brian Lawrence and Philip Humber, and their older pitchers broke down and either physically couldn't pitch or they pitched poorly. The Mets ERA this month was nearly 5. Their rotation ERA was nearly 6. They averaged about 4 1/3 innings a start. They just ran out of starting pitching. You could have convinced me in spring training that they didn't have enough quality, but it seemed like they had indexed enough quantity where they had a group they started with, and then they were going to get back Montas and Manaea, and then at some point maybe they'd be able to get to Sproat, and Tong was a surprise, but Sproat, McLean, Tidwell, they thought they had the depth to handle this, and they didn't. The pitching completely fell apart again this year. There were a lot of injuries. There was a lot of bad performance, especially Manaea, especially Senga coming back from his hamstring injury and not being able to be even active late in the season and help in any way. It was a failure. Look, number three on the I can't believe it is, there was a sense of privilege, like this was the NCAA tournament and they were like Duke under Coach K and we're just going to get invited into the tournament. They didn't win. There were, them and the Yankees fell apart at about the same time, exactly the same time. Starting on June 13th, they both went into nosedives. For the Yankees, it lasted 50 games. But the one thing about the Yankees is they broke out of it. Since August 11th, the Yankees institutionally figured out how to do this. Brian Cashman obviously had a much better trade deadline than David Stearns. David Bednar in particular helped straighten out the bullpen. Ryan McMahon brought real defense to the left side of the infield, a few other things. And the Yankees had the best record in baseball since August 11th. And they had a soft schedule down the stretch, and they took advantage of it to get to the tie for the best record in the American League, which wasn't good enough to win the division, but it did give them the number one wild card, which is home field advantage starting Tuesday, and they got in. The Mets, they've all got to look in the mirror. They had soft touches down the stretch. Washington and Miami, they lost series to Washington and Miami. There was no energy. There was no sense of purpose for this. The top of the lineup just didn't out and out win a series here. None of the starters, except for maybe Clay Holmes next to the last day of the season, stepped up and had a big moment. And this was all destructive for David Stearns. He wanted to build a roster around pitching depth and defense, and the Mets had no pitching depth and their defense was terrible. And he had a bad offseason in retrospect. He had a bad July 31st in retrospect. And what else was lost here besides the playoffs was a little bit of faith in all of this. It seemed the Mets had put together a group that they really believed in. Cone, Stearns, Mendoza. The fact that we're talking about, will Mendoza be fired? He's not probably going to be fired. Should Stearns be fired? He's not going to be fired. Should Cone come down with the wrath of God? Maybe. We don't know what Cone's reaction ultimately is going to be on this. That is a loss of faith from where we were a year ago when the Mets and their fans finally felt like ding dong. The Wilpons are completely in the rearview mirror. The bad same old Mets history was in the rearview mirror. This was going to be a new day. It wasn't a new day. This team, it has trouble making the playoffs historically. It does. I think it's made it 11 times in their history. They don't ever finish first. It's hard for them to go back to back. They've never gone 3 times in a row. So now to go 3 years in a row, they have to start next year. That's 2026, 2027, 2028, because they couldn't go twice in a row this year. When all it was going to take was 84 wins. All it was going to take was to be better than the Reds. I've been saying this since July, that this would be a worse collapse than 07. Because in 07, there was only one wild card. And in 07, the Mets ultimately were competing with the Phillies, who were about to have the best 5-year run in their history, which would include a championship and a World Series appearance. And they had stars, levels and levels of stars everywhere on the field, in the rotation. The Mets had to be better than the Cincinnati Reds, the 84-win Cincinnati Reds, and they couldn't do it. It is really unforgivable. The 2025 Mets cannot be pardoned.